Quite the week. How are you?
I think I understand how Caroline Flack felt.
Well, that's quite the opening 20 seconds. In these big interviews, the PR agents will always advise the person doing the interview that the first question is the most crucial one, and it's where they get free rein. In subsequent questions, they're being hounded, they're being guided one way or the other. Sometimes questions are leading from other questions and they're going down a particular road and they have to go travel down with the interviewer. But the first question is when the subject has the chance to set the scene themselves, has the chance to set the tone. They have free rein to do that. Philip has obviously thought about this quite a bit, and with or without probably a PR consultant, probably with a PR consultant, but of course he's got 40 years in the industry, being at the other side of the questions as well. He's a pro at this. So that the answer to the very first question he would have rehearsed several times. He would have thought about it very deeply, I have no doubt. So this particular answer was one that he has put a lot of thought and a lot of work into. From an NLP point of view, for most of the interviews, his eye contact is almost straight. He's making eye contact almost all the time with the interviewer. The opening question is the only time when he completely diverts his eyes and totally avoids eye contact, to the point at which he's almost at 90-degree angle to the line of sight with the interviewer. It would suggest now, in order to do a proper NLP analysis of it, you'd probably have to train hours of watching the person's eye patterns. That is available. If you watched maybe several hundred hours of This Morning, you would probably be able to train that properly. But this is just incredibly interesting in that he totally diverts. And from an NLP eye pattern point of view, Philip is, as far as I know, right-handed. I've done a little bit of digging in that to see if he is, and from his performance on This Morning, there is probably enough evidence there to say that he is right-handed and he has a right-handed preference at least. He's looking towards his left, around the middle, which would suggest auditory remembered, that for this one he's remembering something that he's rehearsed out loud, probably prepared a certain answer and rehearsed it out loud quite a bit. So he's looking midway left, auditory remembered, and it's the one of the few times actually that he's looking in that direction. For most of the other time, and we'll see it later, he's looking at visual constructed or sometimes auditory constructed, which would suggest that he's constructing a scene in his mind. Here he is looking very much away from the interviewer, and the answer that he's prepared is quite shocking, I would say, and many would have thought was a very ill-advised one. He says that he feels he knows how Caroline Flack felt. Very ill-advised answer, because nobody knows how Caroline Flack, or indeed any suicide victim, felt. I would feel that was quite an insensitive start, really, and very ill-advised start to an interview, because to suggest that anybody knows how any other suicide victim felt is a real stretch, and probably quite insensitive and wrong, really. He sets the scene in trying to paint himself as the victim, when mostly in these cases the aim would be a conciliatory, trying to set a more conciliatory scene to it.
Last week, if my daughters hadn't been there, then I wouldn't be here.
This bit, I think, is really, it's overacted, and I think even he, looking back in this, would have to sort of acknowledge the the cringe kind of element of this. He is an actor, he's a TV presenter, and he's really presenting a bit of an sort of an insincere, overacted. I mean, this is almost Shakespearean. The deep pauses between sentences. The one moment, and one of the rare moments where he's looking up to visual remembered, is when he talks about his daughters. So he's visually remembering the daughters, but then it goes straight back to visual constructed when he says, "I wouldn't be here." The tongue comes out at the end, which would suggest a lack of sincerity and possibly a lie. I think really this is going way too far. It's coming across as insincere from the body language. It's emotional blackmail. I think it's moving into that sphere. It's kind of saying, "You have persecuted me," all of this, the criticism, a lot of what people, and there might have been a bit too much criticism, but a lot of people would see us holding it to account. But either way, the message right from the start, very intensely, is you have made me into a victim. You're persecuting me, and now I'm a victim. Not just a victim, but I'm pushing it to the point of that you're going to kill me, which is quite a strong approach to take out of the blocks. Yes, the other bit about is where he refers to the daughters, which is another very unusual, let's say, approach to take. Most parents would look on their daughters in a sort of a protective role, and he has kind of rather clumsily and awkwardly now elevated them to a position where they're sort of like his guardians, and again it's kind of reinforcing the victim role. It doesn't sit well that he's putting his daughters into this kind of protective role when it should really be the opposite.
And they've guarded me and won't let me out of their sight. It's like a weird numbness. I know that's a selfish point of view.
Admitting within the first 60 seconds that I know that's a selfish point to take is kind of an interesting self-reflection there, and it is quite a self-centered opening to the interview, and a surprisingly self-centered one. And this business of the daughters not letting him out of his sight, again, very over-dramatized, victim-centered presentation, and really elevating the daughters to a kind of protective role doesn't sit well. It's kind of flipping on its head the natural process of things.
But you come to a point where you just think, how much are you supposed to take?
Looking down at the auditory digital place there, where he says you come to a point where you wonder how much you're supposed to take, and that's sort of said in a very dissociated way. He really should be saying, I came to a point where I wondered how much I am supposed to take, but he's dissociated himself from it, which kind of seems to suggest that he's not terribly comfortable with it, and he's dissociating himself from it, and there's a feeling that maybe he feels, part of him maybe feels that he shouldn't be thinking this, that maybe he deserves it. So there's a certain inner conflict there. He's distancing himself from it.
If all of those people that write all of that stuff, do they ever think that there's actually a person at the other end?
All of those people who write all of that stuff, do they ever feel there's somebody at the other end? What he's referring to there really is hate-filled trolls who are there always, and for any issue, particularly with celebrities, and it's a problem that runs across all celebrities and across all time. I think what he's deliberately maybe trying to avoid is the fact that this is different. This is perhaps ordinary people or ordinary commentators are legitimately commenting on something that does have legitimate public interest. And I think by the insinuation there is that everybody who's objecting to this or who's calling him to account is kind of a hate-filled online troll. There's a little bit of a deceptive approach there by trying to misdirect it into an online troll hatred kind of thing.
And so, here I am.
Yeah. Are you feeling okay to do this? Are you feeling strong enough to do this interview?
Yeah, I have to.
Why? Why do you want to do this interview?
Because there is an innocent person here who didn't do anything wrong.
After the initial admission that all of this is quite selfish, I think he said, now he's there's a bit of a 180 transition, which is a little bit difficult to swallow, where now he's saying that the entire purpose and motivation of the interview is for somebody else, which is a bit of a stretch for the common viewer to appreciate or to actually believe. And setting the scene really that the only reason he's here is for the guy. Not terribly credible. The other slight problem there is the moment where the interviewer is nodding to the answer that Philip is giving to him. Little bit of a mistake. It's a bit of a compromise of his, slightly compromising his neutrality there in that. It's a minor issue, but at the same time, really, I think it shows the point that, I mean, one of the difficulties here is that a relatively unknown interviewer is interviewing a god, a giant of the entertainment industry. And it's pretty vital that he doesn't bow to that mass celebrity and keeps it on an even level. So that kind of graceful nodding there is a little bit of a sacrificing his neutrality a little bit.
Who is vulnerable and probably feels like I do. And I just have to say, stop with him.
He's now coming out of the first phase of the intro stage, the first minute and a half. There's a marked change in tone between the first minute and a half, where he's looking auditory, remembering his initial statement, which is quite a shocking one, to now transitioning into where he's on the ropes, as it were, from the interviewer. Not on the ropes, it was quite a light interview by modern standards, but where he's normally looking at visual constructed, where he feels that maybe he has to construct an image or sound to a random or a more random question that he's been asked. Also, the kind of overacted, more theatrical, dramatized intro, where it's long Shakespearean pauses, and it's almost like a Shakespearean tragedy, now transitions more into normal interaction. All of it really feels quite insincere. It's totally different to the normal character that we're used to seeing.
When did you last speak to him?
As I engaged the lawyer for him.
This is one of the first of the tougher questions, and Philip goes straight up to visual constructed there, and quite an interesting and intense look at visual constructed, which might suggest that he's trying to construct an image rather than trying to remember it. And an unusual way of saying it, as I engaged the lawyer from. He doesn't say when I engaged the lawyer for him. Because the question was a temporal question. When was the last time you spoke with this guy? And he is visual constructing, and he says, as I engaged the lawyer from. That's kind of an interesting detail there, I think.
So he needed independent support, and so that was the last time.
Is that a few weeks ago now?
Yeah, a couple of weeks.
Okay. How concerned are you about his welfare right
Serious flick, the visual constructed there on the word massively, which might throw some doubt over how much he's concerned about himself relative to concerned about the subject that they're talking about.
And then when you met him in person, was there a little moment of sexual attraction then even?
Absolutely not.
The absolutely not here is a little bit difficult to believe, because later we're led to believe that they had an affair very soon afterwards. So when did the attraction? So there was absolutely no attraction to so much attraction that he couldn't help himself, and an affair happened which ruined his career. There's too much of a gap there, I think, at this point.
Okay, so to be absolutely clear, how old was this young man when you first had any kind of sexual contact with him?
20.
The 20 here is probably okay, but there's definitely a move to visual constructed there, and a pause and a little bit of hesitancy, which may or may not indicate anything really, but we'll see later that this is kind of qualified a little bit.
It just happened.
How old was he at this stage?
20, 21.
The second time he asks the question, he gets a slightly different qualified response. So first time he asked, there was a hesitancy and he said 20. Now he's saying 20, 21, which may or may not indicate anything, but it is noticeable that there is a difference in the answer here.
Who knew on the team?
Nobody.
The nobody answer here as to who knew on the team is one of the few clear and direct straight answers that he gives, which is the most believable answer.